Hey Blazers, this episode is brought to you by Audible.com and the Amazon Company. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Blaze Entertainment.
Or visit the sponsor and supporters links on our website at intotheblaze.com. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Now let's start the show.
You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
What's going on, Blazers? We're back with another episode, actually our first episode of our Spotlight edition of Blaze Entertainment. I'm your host, Kwame, joined by the lovely, the beautiful, the melanin proficient, Miss Free. What's going on?
Not much. I'm tired.
We actually have a special guest on our show today. Today we have the amazing, the awesome, the dope, Mr. Scott Doucet. How are you, sir?
I am good after an introduction like that. I didn't know I was amazing or dope. How are the two sexiest podcasters on the East Coast doing?
Well, you know. West Coast, actually.
I mean,
yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, wait, what?
I'm on the East Coast. Apparently, I'm not, Miss Free's not the only tired one in the room, apparently. The West Coast.
So, Scott, for those who don't know of you, and if you don't know who Scott Doucet is, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But for those who don't know, please explain a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all that jazz, please. Okay.
I'm an East Coast Canadian. I like beer and hockey, long walks on the frozen beach. I'm a podcaster, podcast producer, all-around businessman. I run an online community for podcasters called the Podcast Discovery Center, and and pretty much just trying to find my lot in the online business community, helping as many people as I can just churn out stellar shows. That's my job description, I suppose. That's what I do.
Right on. And I think you're being a little humble, which I appreciate, but I would like to say Scott has created, along with his kind of co-founder of Podcast Discovery Center, a home and a place. And I know Miss Free and I talked about this on a couple of episodes before in regards to kind of entering into the podcast world and how you can kind of get a little bit of negative backlash and stuff. And you've kind of created, along with Anthony Hayes, this home and this world where, kind of a safe space for podcasters to grow and learn and to kind of, grow their show, grow themselves as podcasters, and just be all around great networkers. So kudos to you for that.
Don't tell people about it. You're going to saturate it, and a bunch of awful people are going to show up. Like,
right?
Could you imagine?
I'm sure everyone who listens to the show is badass, so I'm not worried.
Right.
We got some crazy people that be writing into our show. Let me just say.
We do. we deal with it on almost a daily basis. So,
I wouldn't imagine with the shit you. Is this a PG show? Can I swear? Or
absolutely.
Okay, well, with the shit you guys cover on your show, I am not surprised that you get people riled up and you get all flavors of human beings and human interaction. The show that I listened to before Kwame came on to do his interview with Podcast Bay, Miss Free, you were crying.
I was. I'm a very emotional person.
Kwame was angry. You guys hit every topic that like I've maybe pondered about, would never have the guts to say as, a spoiled white kid. You guys like hit it all. And I was like, you can publish this shit? Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, I could not believe it, but I loved it. I was hooked.
We appreciate that.
Yes. Maybe I should stop crying. A little bit too much.
I developed a podcaster's little boy crush on that episode, so you do what works for you. It works.
Oh, thanks.
blushing? I think I hear her blushing.
I'm not.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Scott, I actually wanted to talk to you about, one of the questions that I had is what got you into podcasting and why did you stick with it? Like, what is it about podcasting and helping others develop their podcast that kind of keeps you locked in?
Well, it's a longer story. I kind of tripped over it, but to give you the shortened version, I started my first job on radio. I was just a kid. After leaving radio and graduating from school, I ended up working in retail and sales and management and leadership jobs for 10 years. At the same time, I was recording music and I was in a band and I was doing like merchandise and stage show and booking and stuff like that. And it was very meaningless to me. It didn't mean anything. And so I wanted to do something a little more fulfilling. So I started public speaking and jumping into the schools and talking to youth and trying to empower the kids who are falling between the cracks, the kids who aren't self-motivators and self-starters, the kids who might be, smoking dope and failing, even though there's a lot more potential to be had. And I wasn't getting the traction I wanted. And a mentor, a business coach I was working with at the time approached me and said, "Have you ever thought of podcasting?" And at the time, I had just thought podcasting to me at the time was just a bunch of overweight guys reviewing movies, right? Like there was nothing really to it that made me think, okay, this is a great business opportunity. And so he pointed me in the direction of podcasting. I immediately took to it like a fish in water and just started researching and educating myself to a point where all of a sudden I knew more than a lot of people. And like what I took as industry standard and common sense, I took a step back and looked around at other podcasters and realized that the stuff I knew wasn't common sense anymore.
Mm. Well said. Yes. and I think for me, that is key and pivotal in kind of making decisions on where you want to go in life and kind of having an understanding. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of talked about when I was on your show, Podcast Bay, like that plug-in. You guys check it out because it's a phenomenal show. But one of the things that we talked about was just, having that niche and knowing what your place is and your role is in the podcast world, because there's such a huge ocean, not sea, I guess, but more of an ocean of so many voices out there and so many people with different opinions and thoughts and how to do things. And it's become so saturated, which is a good thing because we want podcasts to get up there and start becoming more mainstream. But the issue with that is that there's so many of them out there that a lot of people kind of don't know what their niche is, and they don't usually stay in that niche or that area or that realm, I guess, of what they know to do best. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. And you've said a lot there that I want to pick apart just because that's me. But the main thing was just, I knew stuff and other people were struggling. And I come from a place like my mom was an EA. She worked with disadvantaged children. I grew up in a very a structured and instructional household. My stepdad was a soldier, and so there was a lot of discipline involved and a lot of teaching me how to do things the right way. And then my mom was really big on education. And so as I looked around and I started realizing like I have knowledge and I can use this to my advantage and make my shows really great. But what about the rest of these people who are getting disillusioned, lied to, sold to, having products crammed down their throat, having their ignorance taken advantage of? And that's where the PDC was born, Podcast Discovery Center. Anthony and I we had a call one day and we were like, we belong to 5 or 6 Facebook groups apiece about podcasting that are literally they have a hidden agenda of pushing the admin's products. Why don't we start our own? Mm-hmm. And it felt immediately good. It felt like where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be doing. And now I have an agenda and I'm pushing my products elsewhere. But the PDC, the PDC is still very much a safe place for people to ask questions and learn and not be bombarded with self-promotion,
Right. Now, with that being said, like, what would you give other people who are trying to come into the podcast world or have questions? Because we actually got a couple of listener letters, and I guess I kind of where we were coming from in terms of the advice that we gave them was to kind of just go out there and just do it, because I feel like if you have those type of aspirations to, and you're creative and you want to do those type of things, and nobody should kind of stop you to do it. But I don't ever advocate, how to do something, because that's not my place. I feel in my calling, and I know Miss Free is like, just, hey girl, do it. You know what I'm saying? Like
honestly, truly,
right.
Don't waste your time. Do it for free. I don't care how you do it. Just get started.
Exactly. And so I think for us, it was more of a situation where just go out there, research, find out what works best for you. But what would you give, people who are just even considering it or even just starting out, kind of what notes would you give them to kind of help them along that journey on discovery?
Miss Free, why do you podcast?
I like it because it's fun. Period.
So you do it for the fun.
Exactly.
Kwame, why do you podcast?
I love to be able to have a platform to be able to express my opinion, and to kind of give awareness to certain things, because I think that there's not a lot of representation for people of color, and there's not a lot of space for people to kind of understand where we're coming from. So that helps.
You always gotta make my answer seem so basic.
Oh no, these are, rest assured, these were both answers I was hoping would come out. See, I podcast to supplement and subsidize my business. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we have 3 different reasons, 3 different whys to podcast. Mm-hmm. So if you're approaching it for a fun angle, that takes you in one direction of how you're going to do this. If you're doing this to spread awareness like you are, Kwame, that takes you in a different direction altogether of goals you're going to have to establish. Mm-hmm. And then myself, from a business point of view, that takes me in a third direction. So the person who's doing this for fun and wants to shit talk celebrities or do a Dungeons and Dragons gaming podcast or do movie reviews, they're going to be different than someone who wants to highlight world issues or raise awareness about autism, or, those are 2 different podcasts. And then the marketing guru over here off to the side who wants to make $1 million. Why? Why do you want to do this? Because if it's to jump in and make $1 million, go the fuck home. Like, just turn around and go home and do something else, because go into sales if you want to make a bunch of money, because that's where it is. Right. But if you want a podcast, I feel you need to have your reason why figured out, because it's harder than people make it sound when they're trying to sell it to you.
Right.
And it's easier than people make it sound who have been at it for a long time. Like, people who are just starting out, they make it sound really hard. People who have been at it for 10 years make it sound really easy. The truth is, it takes a lot of balance. There's a learning curve. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving pieces. And it's not for people who are meek, scared, have bad time management. So your why is what's going to pull you through a lot of this stuff, a lot of the learning curve. It's basically going to be the fire that's lit under your ass. Mm-hmm. Without a solid why, you shouldn't be doing this, I don't think.
Right. And I think that just to kind of harken back to what Miss Free had said in terms of her why, she was saying how, you always make my answer sound basic. And I think that, I think, going back to what you said, Scott, in terms of, having that balance, I like how our show is, because Miss Free's able to balance me out in terms of not going too political, not going too social, justice warrior type thing. And then, I'm able to balance her, to kind of bring awareness to what is going on, but still keeping it fun. And I think that that's something that is important to have that balance. And that's one of the reasons why we're we kind of focus on, having fun and making sure that regardless of what we talk about, at the end of the day, it's still fun and we vented out what we needed to vent out. So.
I love that, and I do, and that's the one thing about you two. Like, I wanted to get on this show so bad just because of your chemistry back and forth. Like, you guys have been friends for what feels like forever, and that comes across on the mics, and I love it. I love that chemistry because it's very rare to find co-hosts in the business sector that sound so natural and so free flowing. Like, I akin your show to almost the chemistry that I hear on The Breakfast Club, which
wow.
I spent my day watching in preparation for this because I was like, man, they're going to hit issues that I don't know a thing about. But I'm glad you're tailoring it to podcasting. But like, for me, part of my why, right, is I do this alone. And a part of why I wanted to do this, a lot of people may or may not know this about me by now, but I have social anxiety. Like, I can't even walk into a Costco or a Walmart without freaking out.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, inside. And so, like, I'm actually shaking right now talking to the two of you. Every time I get on an interview or an episode, it triggers my anxiety. And it's hard for me to do a lot of things that most people find very natural, very normal. I have to talk myself up to them. Podcasting kicked the crap out of that for the most part because I'm talking to new people all the time, and I'm constantly building new relationships, and I'm always in a position where I can stick my foot in my mouth and say something that I completely don't mean, right? So it gets you on your toes. And I mean, that if it weren't for my why, wanting to educate people and help people and serve people, I don't know if I'd have the guts to do this, man. Like, I don't know if I could do it.
Well, I mean, first of all, that's just an awesome, like, just revelation for me personally, because we've been talking for how long have I been in PDC? Oh my God, it feels like forever. But like, I didn't know that about you. So, and then listening to Podcast Bay and also your videos that you post in Podcast Discovery Center, it just sounds so free flowing, and I'm just like, I need to learn how to talk like him, so that way it just comes out smooth, and like, you just have this aura and this command about you when you start talking. So I didn't know that you had that. That's interesting, and that, which goes to my next question: how does it feel to do podcasting as solo? Because I think for me, like, I don't know if I could do it solo. I've been thinking about it, but I don't have anything to bounce. Like, that's one of the reasons why Miss Free, like, have this vibe, because like, I say something and she'll respond to it, and I'm like, no, bitch, that's not what I wanted. You know what I'm saying? So we go back and forth about it, and I think that's, it's kind of a soundboard for each other. So I don't know how I would feel doing it solo. I admire those that do their podcast solo, because it's solo and you're talking, like, you're just talking to yourself, kind of, almost, it feels. So how does that translate for you?
Well, to be honest, my first show was aimed at students. It was aimed at millennials, people who are either just graduating high school or had just gotten out and they're just in college. And I did that show with a co-host because I refused to do this alone. I was terrified. And I like you two, I picked a friend of mine, someone who wasn't necessarily a podcaster, but someone I knew very well. His name was Josh McKenzie. I called him J-Mac. It pissed him off. It was fun.
J-Mac?
Yeah, J-Mac. And he's just this big, like, 300-pound Scottish guy, right? And it was a lot of fun for me to just, get on and make fun of him, and he'd make fun of me. And it broke the ice for me to have someone there. But he had 3 jobs. Like, he wasn't out to start an online business or do anything like that. He had 3 jobs. He had 3 kids. He was a busy man, and scheduling became an issue. So eventually I realized that having that other person there was actually holding back my ambition. And so for me, it was a necessary shift to put on my big boy pants and go out and do it myself. And it was scary at first, definitely. But I realized that for me to dive in and have a co-host on the podcast subject might be too many cooks in the kitchen,
Yeah.
So for just myself and my guests to be able to sit there and talk, we don't have these long silences like Miss Free has to do right now,
Was that shade? I mean,
I think it was.
Jeez. I mean,
I'm living for it.
All right. I have nothing for you. I'll let you take that one.
But, like, to me, it was just, thank you for that. But it was just, I didn't want to get into this three-way conversation situation where I would always have a lot of opinion and someone would have to sit beside me quiet, So it just, for me and my guest to get in there and vibe back and forth, and for me to go, Kwame, what do you hate about this industry? Or Miss Free, what do you love about this industry? Or, so-and-so, what are some tricks you use? They get to just spill it. And once they're done talking, I pick up from there, and there's no jumbling or tripping over each other or anything. So it works out really well for the dynamic of my show. But if my show were more based on opinion and less on education, I think I would want a co-host beside me just so we could argue a lot.
I see that.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, like, because I think it's funny you said that, because I think for me personally, and I think I guess I can speak for Miss Free in this one. One of the reasons why we kind of linked up and is because not only do we have similar, thought frames and opinions on certain things, but also we have enough respect for each other to be like, okay, well, I like blue and she likes red, but I don't like red, and we're okay with that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know I'm not okay with that, first of all.
And it's never an attack, Miss Frey. But it also promotes such, especially when we're on topics, talking about different things or whatever. And when we actually, unite on a particular opinion on something, I pity the fool on the other end, because Miss Free goes off and she amps me up, and then I go off, and then I amp her up, and then she goes off, and it becomes I feel bad for the person after. So it's like, should we publish this? But with that being said, like, have you run across anything? Because I know that one of the questions that you had asked me on your show was, are there any issues like that you have with co-hosts? And I don't think we've ever had an issue in terms of me and Miss Free. And I think that's one of the reasons why we still are so many Blaze Entertainment. But I think for you, do you think that you would ever see yourself having a co-host? And if so, would you do something that's like, well, I guess the question is, would you be opposed to doing something that's more opinionated and more as opposed to education?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't readily have an answer for that. I stick to what I know. I really do stick to what I know, and what I don't know are politics and current world issues and things like that. So when those types of conversations start happening, I like to kick back and I like to listen. And I really do. And so like I said, again, socially awkward, right? So small talk for me sometimes is difficult. And so I'm the kind of guy who likes to cut straight to the chase. Like, you have questions, I want to answer them. Let's do that. And so I think a co-host would really hate me. The reason why Josh was a dream for me is I would say something that I was so damn sure was going to be profound and educational, and the minute I was done, he would just completely like piss all over it and make fun of me for it. And it would like, I would feel myself like turning red, and like we'd be on like, we got to talk to a cast member of The Walking Dead and the Blue Man Group and stuff like that, just trying to give youth an idea of like, you don't have to go through the proper channels, you can do whatever you want. And so I'd go to say something so profound, and he'd be like, way to go, Captain Obvious, or like he'd say these things, and I could feel myself wanting to like just poof and vanish, So I don't know if I'd be willing to put myself into that situation with someone I didn't know very well. It would have to be someone like you yourselves, who know each other, you have a lot of respect for each other. Because like, I know some people who go into like bands and musicians, they hate each other and yet they work together for 20 plus years. I will never understand how people can do that. you know?
Well, coming from a professional, you said you were dedicated to making a solid podcast. So what does make a solid podcast in your opinion?
Compelling content. There's three C's for me. So one is content, and you two have it. You speak to relevant issues. You get in and you do controversy, which is nice. You don't always agree. You don't always disagree. You pretty much cover all of the bases that a good show needs as far as content goes, because if it's the same shit all the time, no one wants to tune in. Mm-hmm. So on the content side of it, so important. Charisma is the second thing I need. No one wants a host that like stammers and can't get their point across and is just, they don't know how to carry a conversation. They're not very charming. There's nothing about that host that makes you fall in love with them. Not like, you know, cream your pants, fall in love with them, but more like just you want to listen to them because of what they're saying or how they're saying it or the points they bring up, or that the host has to be somehow attractive to your ears, your eyes, your mind, whatever. So content's number one, charisma's number two, consistency is the third one. And so if you are charismatic, you have amazing content, and you can put it out to your listeners consistently, you have the cornerstones of a good show. And then after that, it's just, you know, you got to learn how to promote it. You got to up your audio quality. You got to take care of the more technical pieces. But as long as you can cover those three things, you're good in my books. Like everything else can be learned.
Right on. Well, in the words of the professional, Mr. Scott Doucet, I think we're doing pretty okay.
Wow. You know, you keep calling me Scott Doucet. I feel like you're throwing me shade. I am not a douche, man. It's Scott. It's pronounced Doucet.
I am so sorry, Doucet.
Check and mate, Kwame.
I have not.
You was over there living for my shade, so how about you handle something?
I have not been called a douche so happily times in my life.
That's how they say it in France.
So there's a lot of douchey people from France.
Speaking of that.
Oh no! Don't tell me one of your horrible listeners is a douchey French guy.
Well, you know, maybe. Right. I don't know.
We did get a listener letter from the UK, so it's crawling. Getting over there.
One of my top countries was France, and I'm not sure how that happened. I don't speak a lick of French on the show. I do speak French, it's not on my show, so I don't know how France got so dialed in. But I bet you they were waiting for that comment.
You're welcome, Scott. So, Scott, for those who don't know, where can people find you? Just like let us know your social medias, your website, etc.
Well, right now I'm building a site called podcastbay.net. That's the URL, and there's going to be free content on there as well as some membership stuff. So if you want the free stuff, just go in, look around. We'll be adding a lot of craziness later for people who want to invest money. But on the social media side of it, Facebook, I'm facebook.com/podcastbay. And then Twitter, my handle is @podcast_bay. And then Snapchat's just Scott Doucet, all one word.
Right on. Well, it's been a pleasure and a complete honor to have you on our show. We really appreciate it, Scott Doucet.
I
really appreciate all the shade and the advice that you've given us today.
Miss Free, I hope after this you would entertain my invitation to come on Podcast Bay and talk some shit.
Oh, yes, sure.
Coming from a professional to another professional.
Okay, all right. My people are touch your people.
Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so much fun, and hopefully we can have you on the show again. So it's been real.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, guys, it's been another episode of Blaze Entertainment Spotlight Edition. Go ahead and check out entertheblaze.com for more content, and we will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.